Sorry. Okay. Well, we're done. Thank you, everyone. Good night. And then, if time allows, then we can go over some of the other items that we were going to go over last time. I sent those to you last time, review of last year's budget. Really, that's just some of the categories of the budget. And then I was going to talk some about employee benefits, debt service and capital projects, and transportation. Again, those aren't pressing for tonight. If we can get to them, great. If we don't, that's okay too. So we'll start with the income-based tax exemption. So just to remind everyone, was anybody not here, that's here tonight, not here at the first meeting we had? Oh, okay. Here, I have folders then for, these were given out the first night. It's some information that was given out at the first meeting. All right, so just to refresh everyone's memory, so the income-based tax exemptions, they are for senior citizens, meaning over 65 or older, and also the term they use is persons with disabilities. And it's income-based, so somebody has to apply for it each year to get the exemption. And the chart that I had given out last time, income-based tax exemptions, on the left side shows what the income brackets are currently to get the various exemptions. And the exemptions start, well, can be as high as 50%, and it's every 5% all the way down to 5%. So the last time these income brackets were increased was around 2009. So here's the way these work. So the state legislature passes legislation allowing local governments to offer these exemptions. They don't say we have to, but they say each local government can. Local government could be a school district, it could be a town, a village, a county. And then it's up to each individual taxing authority whether to adopt these allow these exemptions or not. So Three Village always has on this senior citizen and persons with disabilities exemption. They've always allowed it. And we currently have 204 people to get one of these exemptions. I don't know how many at what percent. That I'm not privy to that information, but I could tell you in total dollars, those 204 people save approximately $708,000 on their taxes. Now that means everyone else's taxes, this is where I used the example last time about if we all go out to dinner and the bill comes and someone says, well, wait a second, and we'd say, well, we'll split it up however, evenly. If somebody says, well, I should pay less, and everyone agrees, okay, you pay less, well, that doesn't mean the restaurant gets less money. It means everyone else has to pay a little more because the bill is what the bill is. Same way with the tax levy. So when we say, the district says, okay, here's the tax levy, if the budget passes, then the tax levy gets divided up among all of the property owners in the district. So somebody gets an exemption, their taxes go down, everyone else's goes up a little bit. And it depends on how many of those people get those exemptions and how much they are for. So that's $708,000 approximately that those 204 homeowners currently save on their school taxes. If we were to take the average home in Three Village, which has an assessed value of $4,200, so you can, when you go home and look at your tax bill, if you don't know your assessment off the top of your head, you can compare that to whatever the average is, to what the average is in Three Village. The average tax increase is just under $53, right? Meaning, okay, so if that exemption went away totally, those 204 people, their taxes would go up collectively by that $708,000, and everyone else's taxes on average would go down about $53. So how much would how many more people will get the exemption with these new amounts? And the answer is, I have no idea. There's no way to know. No one, the town doesn't know, the tax assessor doesn't know how many people fall into these new income brackets. No idea. So, in a sense, we're flying blind a little bit, like, do we just say, well, let's go up to the new max? Or do we do something in between, or not at all? And that's what we're here to discuss tonight. Ultimately, the decision is up with the Board of Education, and they'll make that decision at next week's Board of Education meeting. So, as I said, we don't know how many would fall within each bracket, and we truly won't even know for a couple of years, because this kind of thing, what happens if the board passes it next week, whatever change in the income guidelines, it's in place for next year's school taxes. Not everyone that's eligible for it will apply. It's just the way it is. Not everyone will apply immediately. Some will, maybe a lot will, we don't know. But it will take at least a couple of years before everybody who's eligible will apply, because a lot of people don't know about it. We'll send stuff out, the town sends stuff out, the state will send stuff out, but still, if you remember back to when the STAR program, the school tax reduction program started, which was in 1990, I think it was 97 or 98, I can't remember which now. And it was years before I was still talking to people about their taxes, and I would say, well, 5 years later, I'd say, well, do you have the STAR? And a lot of people say, well, no, I didn't do that. And it takes a while. Now everybody will say, of course I have the STAR. But it takes a while for people to really understand that this is money they can save if they're eligible for it. So we won't truly know. Now, in the past, when these income brackets have increased, it's been a small amount, maybe $1,000 in each one. The reason this is such a topic of discussion now is because they're going up so much compared to what they are. Now, as I said, they haven't gone up in about 15 years. So you can look at it a couple of different ways. You could say, well, if they had gone up a little bit each year, it wouldn't look like so much. Okay, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, well, should it all go all in one shot? And there's no right or wrong. Now, Nick put together a chart, as I mentioned, and this is what I emailed it to all of us, but in case he didn't have a chance to see your email, he's also got all I only printed the summary page, and that's over on the table. And this shows from the current income levels, if they were increased it was back to 2009? Yep. Back to 2000. You want to explain what you did? Instead of me explaining what you did. Oh, could you turn your microphone on, please?
So on this table, on the last column, you have percent increase prior year for the tax levy. So that's applied back to 2009 on the high and the low. And when you extrapolate that all out, you get, in the summary here, the top is basically the raw data rounded to the nearest dollar. And the bottom is my attempt trying to conform it, which I don't think I did too good of a job. I'm looking at it now, but trying to conform it to what the old, I don't know, theory was to 29 to 2901 to 29999. But that's so if the school board back to 2009, every time they raised taxes, they had adjusted these numbers. This is what it would theoretically look like today, being for the 5%, the maximum income would be roughly $54,000. And then pursuant to this thing, the maximum would be $58,400. So it's close. Now,
Right.
whether or not we want to support that or not is a whole different story. But
Right.
looking at the numbers, that's one way that you could justify, or the board could justify, why they would increase it if they so decided.
Okay. And just so you know, I just want to make sure everyone knows that it's the state that first puts these brackets in place and allows the change. So I know you were just saying if this had happened, but this was not something that the board was, could have done over the past 15 years. The state hasn't raised those income brackets since then. So, does anybody have questions, comments? Just want to shout out your opinion on it? Anybody have an opinion? Sherry has an opinion.
You know, I know I'm going to sound like a bad person, and I don't think I am. But one of the things that I have been kind of mulling over is right now we're looking at possibly getting hit with a $9 million cut in aid. And as much as I am all for helping other people, okay, so we might have to absorb that $9 million cut in aid. We also have to look at that in granting this, especially if we do the full ride, that all our residents are going to be hit with that much more. And one of the big things that we all keep talking about is how we don't have a lot of young families moving in, and some people are arguing because our taxes are too high. Well, it may not be tons of money, but it's still even more money that they're going to get hit with. So, you know, we're looking at the residents that are living here now, they're going to get hit with that. But people that are looking to come here are going to look at that too. And I think that we need to be looking at trying to help people, but also looking at we got to save a little of what we have. And I'm concerned that right now, where maybe this is something, sadly, that we shouldn't even address right now. Maybe we should be waiting to find out if we're getting that $8 or $9 million cut in aid. I realize, from my understanding, that the board has to vote on this rather quickly. So, you know, I don't know. Can the board table it till next year? I mean, I know some of the senior citizen residents, as well as the one that keeps coming to board meetings and writing letters, may not be thrilled, but maybe it would be a better time to do it when we're a little bit more stable, because right now we don't know what the governor's doing.
So the board having to vote on it next week, or one way or another make a decision next week, is for it to be in effect for the 24-25 year, right? That doesn't mean that next year, the year after, any time in the future, they can't, you know, it's not a one-time decision. It's in order for it to be effective for next year, it has to be approved by the board by the end of February. So that, and we only have one board meeting in February, which is next week. So that's where next week comes in, for it to be in effect for this coming up year. Which why I said if the board wound up doing somewhere in between on these, right, halfway or third of whatever, then next year or the year after they could go.
They could do more.
More, yeah.
But we also don't know how many people it's going to affect.
That is correct.
Which I think that makes
Right.
it hard too.
Oh, sure.
It's
yeah.
open-ended.
So a lot of these kind of things, what makes this one unique, a lot of times if it's something like this and it's an increase of, let's say, you know, whatever, 5%. If it were an increase of a current exemption of 5% and we say, well, here's how much the exemption is now, therefore increasing it by 5% would cost this and that's what it would cost everyone else. That would be one thing. But in this case, the nature of this, increasing it opens it up to a whole new group of people. And we have no idea how many people that is. So you had mentioned I put the letter, copy of the letter that we had received. This is there's a resident that's come to a few of our board meetings. And then she sent this letter, and I wanted you all to have it because on the letter itself says attention Board of Education. Well, when she brought it here, it was addressed to Budget Advisory Committee. So that's why I wanted you all to have it. So, and so you know, there may be more, but I only know of, well, 2 school districts, Eastport South Manor and Bayport Blue Point, had already adopted the new income limits. According to Mrs. Pollack, when she was at the last board meeting, said Sachem did also, but that came from her. I didn't get that information from Sachem. So there may be other districts. I don't know. That's the only ones I know of. So.
Yeah, I have a question. Sorry,
Yes, ma'am.
A quick introduction. My name's Nancy. I have 2 boys in the district. Do we not have this census data in the town? Or being that this is a demographic that's about to retire, there's a new generation of them coming on every year or so. Do we have a projected growth on this demographics? Nothing.
Well,
Census, nothing.
well,
Not that
there's
matter.
people over 65 is one thing, which we might be able to get an idea for, but then it's who has these income levels. That we have no idea about. There is no census data of how much money individuals make.
And as,
So-
you, and as you mentioned, there's no guarantee that they would actually apply for it.
Well, yeah, and we know not everybody would apply right away. It's just the way it always is. There would be some people who wouldn't, but we don't know how many now would fall into new income brackets.
Which means you couldn't tie it to a dollar amount.
Right.
So we know from the district level about how many households we have, their children are coming out of, but we have no way of knowing whether or not that household is owned by that parent or by their parent, grandparent, or their parents. So we've had situations like that.
Yeah, oh, so I'm glad you mentioned that, because one thing, I don't remember if I mentioned it last meeting. So if somebody has, let's say somebody gets one of these exemptions, whatever percent exemption, this income-based senior citizen exemption. If they have a child attending school living in their home, right, which normally means a grandchild. Doesn't have to be, as we were talking before, Carol's going to have some new grandkids, but Carol's son is going to have a couple more kids. But anyway, he's not a senior citizen, but we were joking about that before. Yes, sir. Sure, go ahead.
Was your question status people that moved here, or was it broken down the way they said? Because I understood you saying, what's the status of people that have moved into Three Village?
I know you're a realtor, so you know the
I'm
answer.
not saying that also that I live here, but I took your question as the way I saw it. I thought you meant, how many people moved here to Three Village, and how many people did that affect for the Three Village School District? Is that where you were going?
Whatever it is, you'd like to answer, yes, go ahead.
So
Love to hear.
that was how I understood the question, which had nothing to do with 65 or younger. It had to do what happened to the Three Village School District in 2023 is going to affect us for the next year. That's how I understood your question, which I would love to know that too. And yes, I'm in the real estate business, but that's beside the point, because there is a way to get the information, and they can get it. They know that too. I'm not saying they're ignoring us. I really liked your question.
We do know for a fact that there are more families in the community this year than there were last year, but there are less students.
Right. So, to that question that Nancy had, we have more families, less students. So that leads to a different question. You can't ask any ethnic question, it doesn't matter. What matters is, if we're getting less families, whatever a family is today, real careful here, whatever that is, we're getting less students. With less students, we're getting the same cost with less students to manage this whole school district. That's how I'm taking it, as a whole. And just for the record, guys, I don't get a penny off it. I don't. And that's fine. I choose to live here. My children are educated here, but they don't live here. But I liked your question.
And we have an aging population,
Correct.
yeah. So
And
down
we
the
have a
line,
more
there's a
diverse
huge impact.
population here as well, which I see as a plus also. It also affects the school district in some good ways and some other ways, because we have to now help them in different ways, because they have to be, and in our area, they're gonna catch on real quick. They need whatever ESL is called today, I'm sorry, I'm calling it something my wife did for 25
Yep.
years. And I know what happened in her district where she worked, was here, it went from 3 classes in ESL in Mattoon, Cutchogue years ago. It's now 9 classes with 4 times the amount of students, and they gotta carry it. And they're gonna have to carry it too, right?
Correct.
How does that all affect us? Here's my thought, just being Michael. I don't see a problem with I don't wanna hurt anybody either. I really don't, and that's why I said clearly up front, I pay the top taxes. I don't have a problem. At the same time, I don't wanna hurt people that really need that little bit of a discount. So I just wanted to say that to you, and I know you too, Sherry, and I really know you,
Yeah.
so I'm saying that.
Yeah.
She bought her house from me a long time ago. That's quite the point.
Was it a good sale?
Still there.
No comment.
Anyway, I'm done with my thought.
No problem.
Because I like your question, because that will help all of us, because just saying, let's leave it to next month, to me, that's a more important question. So what if we waited another month? I'm just dovetailing on what Nancy asked.
Another month to vote on this?
Yes,
It would go to the following year then.
Right.
It would be considered.
because that's,
So then it wouldn't be 24, 25, it would be 25, 26.
and the
Right.
reason for that is the state saying it,
That's the tax date, the,
town of Brookhaven,
I believe it's town of
For us,
Brookhaven.
it's town of
Yes, yeah.
and that's already been decided, you can't change it.
The-
Correct?
Right, that's the taxable,
So that doesn't change.
that doesn't
If
change.
we wait a month, I'm trying.
Then it
to-
doesn't, then there's no change in effect for the 24, 25
year.
set.
So we have to do that now.
If we want it,
If we want it for 24, 25.
if you want it for 24, 25. You have to vote tonight to give it to the board for next week to have it for the 24, 25, whatever.
If we put it out later, then it would be the board voting on it for 25, 26 school year.
To your point then, we are then not helping some of those people if we decide tonight not to change anything.
I don't think the issue is whether or not we help people. I think the bigger issue is what do we establish the limits at?
Good point.
So, do we know what the original 29,000 was based on?
No, I do not.
And that's the town of Brookhaven making that decision.
That was a
The
state.
29,000?
This comes through.
No, that's
This
the
is
state.
This is the
That's
state.
state.
These income
Town is-
levels are the same throughout the whole state.
So Nancy, you're getting into the question, but it's a lot more. And that's why I wasn't taking a shot at Sherry. She knows I know it, but now I'm pressing it. I understand what you're saying, why you're saying that, but I also understand what Nancy's saying. And I really appreciate that he went through the whole effort to give us information. The thing is, we make a decision tonight, we make a decision tonight. We don't make a decision tonight, and I meant that for them on purpose. They're now saying, we don't decide that. That's what I wanted understood. But we decide that, or we don't. Us.
Well, actually, you're
The
making a
board is making the
recommendation. You're
decision.
not deciding anything. You're
Right.
making a recommendation.
You're gonna
The
take
board's
our
gonna decide.
recommendations.
Even if the board can
Thank
turn
you.
around and say, your recommendation, we're not going with it, and we're voting this way or that way.
You still do what you're gonna vote, because you're the board.
I'm not a board member.
I-
I work for the Board of
No matter
Education.
what
I'm not a
you
board
do.
member. I was a board member somewhere else, but not here.
How does
So-
this voting process, how's it held? Take place blind, raise your hands?
The board meeting.
For the,
For-
no, we make a
You tonight?
recommendation? Yeah.
However you want to do it. I mean, you know, if somebody wants to make a recommendation and then
What exactly are we voting on?
what is the committee's recommendation to the board to do?
But there's a range. We're not just saying, it's not a yes or no.
Well, that's what I think
Well,
Jeff said.
exactly.
It's A, if we want to do something, and if we do, how much do we
Do you wanna do?
recommend we do?
Basically, it'd be like a two-part
Does
vote.
that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
So
It's
the,
two votes. Yes and no.
More or
Will you do
less, yes,
something?
Judy. It would be.
It's a yes or no vote, but at the end of the day, it's a recommendation only, because we're an advisory.
Right.
I liked your question too.
But Kevin,
Thank
does
you.
it also pay to look, because I think all communities are facing a declining enrollment. Families are not having as many children. So is this a long-term question as well?
Along the North Shore, Long Island, there's two districts that are growing largely. It's Syosset and Riverhead are growing the
Oh,
most.
okay.
Most of the North Shore districts have declining enrollment. We are leveling off.
Okay.
We're not declining any longer. We're sort of, we've leveled off. But leveling off, when Michael's kids were here, you know, many, many years ago, we were leveling off in the 700s.
Mhm.
Now we're
Right.
leveling off in the 400s.
Right.
So it's a
Right.
new level. Most of our classes come in the 330 to 350 range in
Okay.
kindergarten, and build as they get up to sixth grade to about the 400s, but they stay around that all the way through the junior high school level.
Okay.
And our transient population is not predominantly from seasonal workers, as are the case in some other East End districts. Ours come usually from the university or working in the national labs with some of the scientists and professors leading us. But to go to Michael's point, in the past 10 years, our A&L population has grown by 50%.
Okay.
Now, we're still, that number, still comparatively to other districts, is small. It's about 177 students.
Okay.
What people don't generally realize is that even after a student exits that program, we are required under regulation to still provide services to them for 2 years beyond that. So wherever they exit, they still get services for 2 more years.
Okay.
So, and our special education population, well, it stayed around the same percentage, even though the population has declined. It's the level of services many of those students are requiring that is increasing the expenses. It's not as if they're all at the same level that they were in the past. And the state has also come out with different requirements. You know, there have been hundreds and hundreds of regulations that are written in the past 20 years in special education alone. So that has changed the dynamic of our district. And we pride ourselves on the fact that we keep many of our students in that, and many other districts would be sent out to BOCES programs or residential treatment programs or behavioral intervention programs. I think we do an excellent job of keeping and maintaining those populations here.
Can I just ask a question on that?
Sure.
How many of the students that go into those programs, we just have to use ESL, whatever it's called today?
You know,
Do they test out and choose not to continue? 'Cause
continue in the district or?
as someone that lives in the area, the ones that may come in needing ESL for a period of time, I'm sorry, it's called NL.
English as a new language.
They do test out and move on and choose not to stay in it also.
It's not a choice necessarily program, meaning like continue with the services.
If they don't need them,
It's not usually a choice. We're required to provide them whether they're in the
even
program.
if they're not using it.
Correct. Yeah, most of them generally use it. Anthony, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I know we were talking, when we were talking about that number of 204 that currently takes this
Right.
exemption, you were talking about households, right? And households, it's not people, it's how many, it could be 1 or 2 people in a household. It's a household.
204 households get
Correct,
that.
right,
yes,
it's not by
correct.
person. So the assumption could be 1, 2, whatever, but even if it's an ENL or if it's someone else, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Because it does not affect us, it's the household that pays for it.
Well, and
Yeah.
by the way, the
not
204
even-
do not have students, because if they have a student living in their household, they don't get the exemption.
Okay.
So the 204 that currently get
There's no
one of these
no.
exemptions, they don't have,
Well, that's why I was wondering
Children
why
attending
why the
school in the
ENL
household.
thing was even relevant. It's not relevant.
No,
So-
it's not, because they get it anyway.
Yeah, it's 100%. So I just want to make sure, because it's the households. And the brackets, to me, I mean, if it is 1 or 2 people and you're looking at income, to me, it's it's a very marginal income to be living here. So I don't think we're talking about anything
Long Island in
exorbitant.
general, you're right, yeah.
So I mean, to me, it's a little bit in the numbers that
Right.
we're talking about people who are paying, are living in a household or would, or on their own in a household, and those bracket numbers don't
It
seem like.
smacks of the general issue of, affordability to stay on Long Island. As the older you get, you have a fixed income, and whether or not you can maintain living in a district, in an area like Three Village. It doesn't get cheaper, it only gets more expensive. So if your income is fixed, it's getting more and more expensive every year for you as you continue to stay here. And as the population becomes increasingly older in the country and in general, just the history lesson, the reason why Social Security was set at 65 years ago was because that's when they expected you to die. It wasn't set at 65 during the Great Depression because they expect you to live beyond 65. That was the age that it was put at in that period of time. So there's been arguments, as we've all heard, to increase the retirement age and go further and further because of better medicine, better health, people are living longer, and that's a great thing. That's indicative in this community. You have the 204 households here that have this exception with this income level, and then you have other people who are of the same age who have higher income levels that are still here with no children coming into the district. And then you have rental properties, over 300 houses in this district that are rented to students from the colleges, the university, that don't have any students coming out of those households. So there's a lot of factors to that. And, what we saw back in 2008, a lot of people held, the bottom dropped out, people held onto their houses. A lot of people were upside down in their mortgages. They weren't going to sell because they were going to hope that they would get that equity back at some point in time, or at least pay off whatever they borrowed out of the houses. And then the prices started going back up in the past couple of years, so people are starting to sell again. And we're seeing younger families, as I said, more families, just less kids. Doesn't mean they're not going to have more kids. My own niece moved into the community. She had 2 kids when she got here. One more's on the way right now. So, that's what's going to happen. Families may continue to have that. But the average family size coming into the district now is not coming in as it was 20-some-odd years ago when you and I were here first starting, where it was 3 or 4 kids per household. It's maybe 1 or 2 at the most now.
So would it be a fair assumption to say that the households are not renters, because it's still the person who owns the house is paying for it? So it's not those other than the household that owns it. So my assumption would be that these people who we're talking about who are getting the exemption are probably people who need the exemption and not someone who's taking advantage of the exception. Do you know any possibility or any way that it would be someone who can take advantage of this? Because I'm going through the assumption, I just want to make sure. Do you understand why I'm asking that question? Because the assumption would be these brackets are so low, and if these people really need it and there's no way of scamming it, then to me, these brackets are super low to be where we are.
And exactly to your point too, as Jeff mentioned, even in the first year, lack of knowledge of it being available, some people may not even apply for it. So we may not see the full brunt of, or whatever it might be, from the number of people that could qualify to even apply for this at some point.
Right, and for us to leverage that, and I'm just giving my opinion, to us to leverage that because we're going through a hard time, is not really fair to what this is really talking about and what they need it for.
And so, in a way, the state aid proposal that the governor put out and this have nothing to do with each other. Because this, what we're talking about, is on the tax levy, right? So the tax levy is determined by the tax cap formula, right? So that's going to say, here's the tax levy, the maximum tax levy that we could have. Then that's our biggest piece, that's one piece of revenue. It's our biggest piece of revenue, but it's one piece of revenue. The next biggest piece of revenue that we have is state aid. So if state aid goes up by 3 million or it goes down by 8 million, that's on that side. When you add them together, then it would determine how much, plus other miscellaneous revenues, but those are the 2 big ones. Then it determines how much the budget could be, right? So when we start talking about, when we get, after this, when we get onto the governor's budget proposal and throughout the remainder of the process of this committee, then we'll be talking about the budget itself. And again, if our aid is going up, it's staying the same, or it's being cut by 8 million, then we have to figure out how we need to make our budget, our program, fit that budget. The tax levy is going to be what it is, assuming, and our recommendation to the board will be go out at the cap. Whatever that cap, when all the data is in, and we know exactly what our cap is for next year, our recommendation is go at that. Don't go somewhere less just to, whatever. We go out at the cap. So that's where this comes in. So then how that levy, right, that tax levy gets divided among everyone, that's where this comes in. So that's why I say the one has nothing to do with the other. So it's not a matter, now, the one way, and I know people are going to go crazy when I say it, the one way that where it could is if we were to go above the cap. But of course, we tried that a couple of times and we saw how that worked out. But short of that, the cap is going, the tax levy is going to be what the cap says. Then how does that get divvied up? The state aid reduction by itself doesn't increase the tax levy, because if we're before the tax cap, that'd be a different story, right? So when we went through this same kind of thing with state aid back in 2010, when at the time it was called the cap elimination adjustment, one thing we could do at the time was increase the tax levy accordingly, or somewhat, to make up for that loss in revenue. With the tax cap, we can't do that.
So I want to support what Anthony was saying in the sense of, when we think about the number of people who are senior citizens in our community who fall into this age bracket and the income bracket, they're trying to sustain themselves in a very expensive area of Long Island. If we have any compassion to that group of people at all, to think about what they're going through, I don't know if increasing this by a portion or fully is going to allow them to sustain themselves here. It may be impossible, even with the way taxes are increasing and the cost of living is on Long Island. But from our standpoint, as a budget advisory committee, that's the thing we must consider, is that if these folks have lived here, their children probably went here, their grandchildren may have gone here, and now this is the least we probably can do to maybe help some of them, maybe not all of them, be able to remain here for a portion of time, however much more life they have to live here, before they have to move to another state or go into assisted living or a nursing home, God forbid, in any capacity. It's at least a compassionate gesture in that capacity. I don't know how compassionate people are going to feel when they get their tax bill, but that's a whole other story, how much this will be overall. And we literally have no true way of knowing what that will be. So that's as a superintendent of schools, that's my appeal for the sake of those individuals. And it doesn't matter whether we consider them that they vote for the budget or they don't vote for the budget. It's irrelevant. It's a matter of what we are doing to try to help the people within our community. And we are the school district, and these folks are still living here in any capacity.
Yes, sir.
I was going to agree with what you said, but also I think Anthony makes a good point.
That's because you both have the same name.
Yeah, that helps. It doesn't. But also, I know we talked about last time, just thinking about this as a percentage of the overall population, this is marginal, in my opinion. In my opinion, this is marginal. And if you're thinking about the 708,000 that everyone's kicking in, it's a small portion of the overall budget. So in totality, if we have a opportunity to help the most marginalized people in the community, I think we should try to do something. And I think the part with the state aid should be separate. Because that
And
could
it
be
is,
9
yes.
million, it could be nothing,
Right.
we don't know.
We
I
don't.
mean,
Absolutely.
again, we don't have a crystal ball.
We'll get to
but-
that when we get to number 2.
But, also, I think there is a fair point that was made about having an aging population, what's this going to look like going forward? And we don't know, but based on the information we have now, it's kind of a marginal portion of the budget. I mean, we can't predict the future, what housing prices are going to do, what the demographics of the neighborhood are going to look like, but as a homeowner, I really only plan on my taxes going up.
Just to give you a sense of.
And no one gets a bill and their taxes go down, so,
In
and that's part
relativeness,
of
we
it.
have over 3,000 households in the community that send children to the schools.
Right.
So that's where we are. So we're talking about 204. Again, we don't know if that's going to go higher or lower, but it's 204 compared to 3,000 plus on the other end that are sending children.
Okay, I have a question which may be really a stupid question.
Never.
But the $9 million cut in state aid, how does that affect the tax levy? I
Well,
mean,
it doesn't. It does not.
So that's what I'm saying. So the tax.
That's why I say the
affects
one thing has nothing to do, kind
In
of,
this
nothing to do with the
situation,
other. In this
So-
situation, what we're talking about.
So they're really two separate, total conversations.
Yes.
Because no matter what our state aid is, this is what our tax levy increase is gonna be.
Correct.
And so this percentage that we're talking about is still just based on that number, whatever our state, not at state aid, whatever our tax levy increase is gonna be.
Right, right. Whatever the tax levy is going to be,
And
is going to
They
be.
could
Whether,
give us
that's right,
10 million,
whether
50
state aid
million.
goes up by 2 million, it goes down by 8 million, or it stays the same, the tax levy is going to be what the tax levy is going to be. This will determine how that tax levy gets split up amongst
Right.
everyone.
Right.
so really, I mean, it doesn't matter. They're separate conversations.
Separate
Separate
conversations, right.
It matters, but it's separate.
Well, of
Yes.
course it matters. But it doesn't matter to this conversation.
Right.
Okay.
So now there's another way, instead of us, well, I mean, it's your committee, it's all of you. So if you have a preference, we're glad that, whatever you want is fine. When we first started speaking with the board about this, and they said they would like, even though it's not really a budget item, this tax exemption, they wanted to hear what the committee had to say. So,
So the question is, are we ready as a committee to give a yes or a no?
that's
So-
exactly what I was
so
going to say. So
How
you
does
could.
everybody else feel? Do you want to do that today? Because if we don't do it today, we don't get to do it tomorrow.
You could,
So-
here's the one alternative, and, I'm sorry, I just want to throw something out. If everyone feels more comfortable, you can, and if you let me know by end of the day Thursday, we all have the group email, And everybody can email me and say, I want to do this, nope. And we can, and if you're okay, I'm just giving a suggestion. This doesn't mean it has to be this, but here could be a suggestion. No change at all. Go to the new max limits or right in the middle. And if you want, if it's up to you, if you want to just do it, whatever gets the most votes, that's what the recommendation from the committee would be to the board.
I'd like to do
If
that.
you wanna do it that way.
Rather than emails, because.
Just do it tonight?
Well, Nick-
That's
other
fine,
people
that's
don't
fine
get
with
it
me.
done right
I
Yeah.
didn't hear what Nicholas said. You wanted to
Yes.
say something?
I was gonna say, I think we should just hold a vote tonight, and, I mean, we're an advisory committee, so let's advise one way or another.
Sounds good.
So we're gonna take a roll, we're gonna take a call. How many are in favor of?
I have one question.
Oh, go ahead, Linda.
So-
Oh, yeah, wait, let's make sure all questions get
Get it
answered.
all the conversations out.
So what is the max limit right now?
That's
Not for next year.
the,
For
it's
what is
paid-
the max before we go to the increase? Is
So it's really just,
39,000 is what the.
Well,
ta-
it's, so the page that says income based, I gave
Yes.
out the first meeting. So on the left side, it gives the brackets for what percent.
we're only concerned about bringing the bottom up, right? Because you bring the 50% exemption up, and then everything else is just, it looks like a straightforward calculation. So we don't need to really worry. And when you say split it right down the middle, that would be 39,500. And then everything else follows.
Oh, you mean accordingly, yeah, because
Yeah. That's why I said I didn't do a good
Right,
job
if you
with
look at the old brackets and the new brackets, they're
Yep.
exactly 21,000, every number is $21,000
Yep.
higher. So if you were to do right in the middle, you would increase every number on here by 10,500.
You got it.
Right.
Okay, so if we have the 100, let's say we leave it at the 104 households and we raise it.
204.
204, sorry, and raise it by 50%? Is that how much more would the taxpayer have to pay if everything remains the same? So
I
what's-
don't know.
We know, as we just said.
And
we
it's
don't
gonna
know
open up
because
to a
more
whole
people
new
can
group
apply
of
for
people.
it.
No, but I'm saying if
Don't-
it's
don't-
just the
don't know.
same
Don't know.
204
Don't know.
households.
Well, first of all, we would know, because even within what we have, I know there were 204, but I don't know how many get 5%, how many get 10%, how many get 15%.
We don't get that
We don't know that information.
But we know like the 204 that are there now will probably get the exemption.
Well,
again.
I don't
don't know
know,
their
I
income.
don't
We don't know
know,
their
some of,
income.
some of those already get 50%.
Oh, you think they may have, you mean?
Well,
No way to
well-
know whether they would get the 50%, the 5%.
Well, right, so of the 204, right, so some of them, I don't know how many, already get 50%. So they won't get anything more. They'll still get 50%.
Oh, so everybody gets a different amount based upon. what
On
their-
their income, that's what
Their
this,
own
this chart
income.
is, yeah.
And
their
then all of
income.
that is averaged out, whatever they get exempt, divided amongst the rest of the taxpayers.
Right.
Correct. So whatever they
And to say, well, what if it's only 204? Well, first of all, we don't know the answer, but second of all, that's a moot point anyway, because increasing the income levels opens it up to more people. So there would be more people, I don't know. And that's the whole issue. We have no idea how many more people.
And those variables can change too, because people could have sold by this in this year, and so
Sure.
homeowners could have left.
And it's year to
So the
year, you know?
Right.
And so sometimes what happens, and this kind of thing happens. So somebody who's in one of these income brackets, right? Somebody who's making less than $29,000 a year, right? So let's assume they only get Social Security, right? Then they have to put a roof on their house, right? Well, they don't have money in the bank, but they have some stocks that they bought, 65 years ago. And so they sell some stock to pay for their new roof, right? However, because they just sold $10,000 worth of stock that they bought originally for, $500, they have a $9,500 capital gain that they have to pay tax on. So there goes a chunk of that money, and then they pay for the roof. Now suddenly for that year, they don't get the exemption because their income was higher. Maybe the following year, it goes back down, they get it. Right.
Just a quick question. So we're talking about this like this could be calamitous if, 10,000 more people take advantage of it. Is there a going back where we say, you know what, that tipping point went too far and we put everybody in the hole, so we go to change it the following year? We're locked into this forever?
I wouldn't say locked into it.
I haven't seen it gone down.
Yeah.
Yes, it hasn't gone up.
We can't change like we're doing here, the opposite.
Could. There's nothing to say it couldn't.
How
Yes.
would be
Yeah.
too favorable though?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a
Could,
feeling some people would definitely complain about it.
could.
But that's why,
Because I support that, you know, help the people that need the help, but if for some reason we made a terrible error that is, you know, bankrupting us,
What if we
there's
did it
no
in
recourse to
steps?
go back.
Yeah, given that
Gradually
sentiment,
see how much of an impact it is.
yeah.
Well, that was, as I
was his
said, that
original
was
point.
one of the,
Is saying yes and maybe
Things
only
is-
doing half of it for the next year and then see how it impacts. And then gradually keep adding more if we can, rather than going the whole shebang and finding out that, like Brian said, that we can't sustain that.
well, because then you would be able to see what the individual impact is to.
How many more people signed up?
Into the individual taxpayer. Because otherwise, right now, there's no way to know
Exactly.
what each individual taxpayer is gonna increase.
But just so you're aware, though, every tier you go up, whether you decide to do a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, until you're at the full, over that course of time, you make more people,
You could be bringing in more
more
people.
people eligible, which again, we would have no way of knowing who all those people might be.
But if you, I just think if you're doing it gradually, as you see the impact, it may be where you can kind of cut your loss a little bit, if you have to.
It can come up every year when we do the next budget.
But
So to
that's-
get through this budget, let's vote yes or no.
Right.
Because if we're saying yes for now, we get another chance to do the whole thing again next year. So that's all they're asking at this moment. We can have lots of other fun conversations.
Right, we can say yes, and we can say our recommendation is, as Jeff said, either all, half, whatever, but that way.
Well, we're gonna take two votes, at least two votes, maybe. One, if you're in favor of granting
Making a
this,
change.
making the change, that's the first vote, just a yes or a no. And then the next vote would be at what level? Okay, so why don't we start with the first one?
Can I just ask a question?
Sure, oh, yeah, go ahead.
So you said that there are 204 families that are taking advantage of this now.
correct.
So if you go to the lowest level here of making, or the highest level, I guess, of having $37,400. And with the new limits, all of those 204 families would be getting a 50% exemption.
Automatically, yes. Everybody who currently gets an exemption. In fact, if it were increased even coincidentally, halfway, right? Because every number on here goes up by $21,000. So if it was right in the middle, half. So add $10,500 to each number, that would make the highest exemption, the $29,000, that would go up to $39,500. So even if you went halfway, everybody that currently gets an exemption, even if it's only 5%, they all go to 50.
Right.
And I don't know how many are already at 50. I don't know that. But everyone, all 204 would be at 50, and then it would open up the window for more people to now come in. Right.
But Jeff, is this I'm assuming it's like a $14,000 slide from the 29 to the 42, going from, the ranges I'm looking at, right? The 30 to the 45. It's it's about a $14,000 to $15,000 increase on the max of these slides. If you're going from
Which
left
one
to
are you
right.
looking, tell me which one you're looking at. Oh, that's what Nick did. That's that's applying the tax levy increase.
So
over
you're
the
saying
last
it's
15 years on
21,000. The
this.
slide is about
So
21,000.
if you look at the one that's income-based tax exemptions, that's
That's
the
what-
current income brackets, the two columns on the left, and the new max allowable by the state, the two columns on the right. And that's the $21,000 increase on each of those. Goes up by, from the current to the new maximum allowable. So that's why I say if it were to be right in the middle, halfway, it increases each one by 10,500.
What my numbers serve to do is just show you that max of 58,400 is kind of sort of in line with the tax levy back since 2009. So if we did vote to just say all the way, that would be one explanation for why we supported going all the way. But other than that, don't look at those numbers.
But the work is very much appreciated, and we really do appreciate it from all our levels because it is showing you that even if we did it that way, it's probably still not where the state is saying it could be. So, Any other comments or questions before we take the vote for the yes or the no first? Okay, so just by show of hands, how many are in favor of doing the increase? And those not in favor? It's okay, Dan. It's okay to be there. All right, so it's 21 to 1 yes to do the increase. Now, next question is, by what percentage of the increase do we want to recommend?
Would anyone like to make a recommendation, or do you want to just vote on half? Does anyone have a preference? Do you want to vote on a third, a quarter, a half? Half?
All right, so
Just do half?
let's do half and let's
Okay.
see what we get.
Halfway.
Vote for,
Can I make a-
Fully understand.
Sure, of course, yeah.
So by raising half, we bump everybody up to 50%. Now 50%, we came up with a number, 53 per household increase. Is that right? Well, based on the scenario, because you were saying there was a 700 to 8,000, what was that number for?
This, the 708,000 is how, the total taxes that those 204 households save
A range from
right
700
now.
to 8,000.
And then
No,
we have-
708,000, 708,
Okay.
708,000.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so 708 plus,
Is the question.
right.
Your question's accurate. He's saying, by us saying what we're saying, that $708,000, he said, that falls back to everyone else to then distribute, and then we all pay that
And how much-
cost.
That's what you are right now.
That's currently.
That's what it is right now,
Because
right,
that was the question, that's the 708,000.
Yeah.
That we're all taking in.
which,
And there's no way to know how much that 708,000 is gonna increase.
It's gonna go up,
Right.
but it's.
It's gonna go up, we just don't.
right.
Exactly.
Right, but a logical assumption would be that it's $53 per household, if that is, assuming that 708,000, say you double that, you're talking about $100 more on each homeowner's
Yes.
Right.
taxes, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing
We'll
a
let the
50%.
404.
Nicholas, you see it the
Right.
same way, because it's your worksheet. I'm just asking for advice, because his question is perfect. So we go up $106 in this scenario,
Potentially.
if we do that to help people. Okay, that's kind of how we have to look at it too. Okay.
Okay,
so essentially it's a bigger capture. We got more eligibility. And we're paying 58, so it could be double, or it could be more than double.
we have no way of knowing.
But that's just a mindset of, just a logical mindset, but it could be more, it could be less, it could be, so if we were looking at a 50%, just so everyone has a point of reference, to me, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it's $106 to help people.
And I mean,
That's a raw average.
the caveats are that it's senior citizens over 65, people with disabilities, and people who don't have children in the district. So it's not
Well,
everybody.
right, it's the senior citizen
Don't have-
or the
Yeah.
over
Don't have
65,
yeah.
and they
Correct.
cannot have children, not anyone else that does have children, but they can't have children in their household attending school.
Dr. Scanlon, can I make a recommendation, rather than just vote for a 50%, because they're 50% yes, no, if we went around the table and just asked to pick one of four numbers, or 25, 50, 75, and 100, and let everybody just pick out one number out of that, see if we get a max out of that range, then you'll have a count.
Sure.
If not, then we can re-vote in a different way.
Sounds like someone that knows math.
Okay. Are we ready to do that, or is there any more questions? Jim?
I just had one possible idea that I was thinking about, because we're not sure how many other people we're opening this pot up to.
Right.
Is it possible, because it seems like we have some leeway to determine what we do, is it possible just to take like the, what is it, the 37,000 and make all of them from 50% to 5% that, so we could determine how many people are going to go to the 50% max in 1 year, and then we could at least get a gauge how much, that particular part of it cost us.
Let me try to reiterate what you just said.
So don't have brackets.
Don't have brackets, just say.
37,004 and below is at 50%.
50%, so at least then we could see, out of the people who are currently getting the exemption, we'd get a quick idea of how many people that were at the 5% and now are at the 50. We'd at least be able to get that without bringing a lot of other people into the pool. I don't know if we're allowed to do that.
Think so. I have to check with the State Office of Real Property Services. If there's like, if that's something that the group wants to do, we'll put that down, and I'll have the answer for the, we'll email it to all of you when I get it. Like, do away with the brackets and just say 37.4 and below, income and below, gets 50%. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, just so at least we could gauge, how many people, that kind of gives us 1 year of saying, okay, we knew how many people now were getting the small exemption to the maximum exemption, and we are, doing something for potentially a decent amount of people. I mean, we don't know the number of how many are at 5, 10, 15, 20, but it does give us a little way to get an idea of, what we're potentially opening this up to.
Of the comments that you guys have received from the community, have they been from people who don't qualify for any exemption or want more
No,
of an exemption?
this is the person.
One person, and then one other person came to the last.
And they haven't
board
given you
meeting.
any, okay.
And they're.
Actually, the other person that came to the last board meeting said she's never had kids, so shouldn't pay school taxes. That was it. But I mean, that was her thing, is that, well, why do I have to pay school taxes if I've never had kids? So it wasn't about this, it was something a little different. But this is the only person we've heard from direct, not that there aren't others out there, but that we've heard from
It's come to
directly.
a board meeting and written letters to the board and the BAC.
However, the target audience probably wouldn't be responding to an email poll, but
When we did the last poll, we had to go to people's houses and show them how to turn on the internet and give them internet. There was some houses that didn't have it.
all right, so how about we do this? Let's call it the Jim Dornachek rule.
That'll be infamous, that.
And that can be what everyone votes on too. So we'll do, or the Jim Dornachek idea. All right, so 25%, 50%, 75% as the three. Is that good?
At 100,
What?
at 100.
Oh, all the way, yes, okay, right, 100%, meaning all the way to the new limit. Or, and I just want to, I'll explain it, and you tell me if I'm saying it correctly, and I want to make sure I'm interpreting what you're saying. So do away with all the brackets and just say the current limit to get a 5%, the highest limit that you can get currently, income and get any exemption right now is under $37,400. To do away with the brackets and just say that number, if you make below that, you get 50%. That's what you're saying?
Actually, yes.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure I got that. Does everyone understand that one? So that's another thing you can vote on. So, so you'll vote either, and when we say 25%, that means from the current levels, a quarter of the way to the new levels, and then 50%, 75%, all the way to the new levels, or that one, just have that one bracket where everybody who makes below that current 37.4 gets 50%. If allowable, I have to check with the State Office of Real Property Services. Any other, yes,
Just want to reiterate, when was the last time there was any increase at all?
2009. Yeah.
Jeff, just to be clear, we're making a recommendation to the board.
This is the recommendation to the board.
The board would still
The
continue.
board
to
has to
discuss
vote
this.
one way or another.
Correct.
Right.
We just want to go around the table.
Sure.
50%.
Okay, Leanne?
100%.
100%? 100%?
I'm gonna skip from there, I want to hear it.
Okay, we'll come back. 25? Nancy?
100%.
100%?
Sort of out there, Jim. Right?
I like Jim's idea because it's logical, but I'm gonna go for the 100%.
100%.
50%.
50%. 100.
50, but I do like Jim's idea. I just don't know that it's gonna pass. So, I don't think they'll like it.
50%.
I was really thinking 50%, but there were some really compelling points for 100.
Linda?
50.
50. 100?
Around 50%, but I want to say that I'm from a split family household, so we're paying double taxation because he lives in Greenwich too.
So you're 50?
Yes.
You were 50, okay.
50 is
And
fine.
Sherry, you said 50?
100.
I'll say 100.
100? And Kevin, you 100?
So it's 11 100s, 9 50s, 125, and 1 Jim.
All right, so the recommendation from the committee to the board is to go all the way to the new income levels. That's the recommendation.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
All right.
That's just the first thing on the agenda.
Well, that was the big one. That's the big one. That was the big one. We knew that was gonna, so now the other thing is, well, this is pretty big too. And if all we get through is this next one, which is talk about the governor's proposed budget, that's okay. The other ones we can catch up on the next meeting. That, I sent information on that last time. And it's, some of those, well, I'll talk about that in a minute, but benefits, debt service, capital, transportation, some of those, I just wanted to start with some of the numbers and give that to you. Those, especially the benefits part, is dependent on staffing. So now that we're going to talk about governor's proposed budget, if we have to reduce staffing, right, so when we cut a position, let's say we cut for every position we cut, here's the areas of the budget it impacts. So we eliminate a position. So let's say it's not to pick on teachers, but we have more teachers than anything else. So let's say we cut a teacher position. So the salary budget goes down, right, for that position. Social Security line goes down because now we don't have to pay Social Security on that. The teacher's retirement system line goes down because we don't have to pay the retirement system on that. If we cut the position, now health insurance line goes down because that person is no longer on benefits. However, we do have to put in something for unemployment insurance if we excess the position, because there's the potential for that person to apply for unemployment. Now, let me just go off a little bit on that. If let's say it's a teacher retiring, right? So teacher retiring and we're replacing the position. So of course the new teacher is making a lot less than the retiring, assuming the retiring teacher's been here 30 years, let's say. They're at top step, they're retiring, and we replace that person with a brand new, right out of college teacher. So similar kind of thing in the budget, the salary line goes down because the new person now is going to be making a lot less, right? Social Security line goes down because that's a straight percentage of salary. The teacher's retirement system code goes down because that also is a straight percentage of salary. However, health insurance goes up because now we have the retiree on health insurance and the new employee on health insurance. So now if it's a retiree, we don't have to worry about the unemployment part. So overall, it saves money, but not knowing exactly what the staffing is going to be, which now we start talking about the governor's budget proposal, I don't know exactly what the budget codes will be on all the employee benefits. I can give you information, or health insurance going up by 6.1% next year, that kind of stuff. But we don't know the exact budget amounts yet, and we won't know that for still a couple of months. So I just wanted to give you some information on that. We'll cover that in a little more detail at maybe the next meeting. And by the way, just before we even start talking about the governor's budget proposal, our plan for the next meeting, which is late February, is to have Erin Connolly, Erin Connolly to do a presentation on special education and pupil services. And I would suggest that you all look at the district website, if you haven't yet, look at last year's Budget Advisory Committee presentations, and there's a couple on there. One was Dawn Mason did about special education services, and there's also a presentation on there that Erin Connolly did on pupil services. Now, she does both of those, so she'll be doing a presentation next time about that. So come, loaded with your questions about special education and pupil services, and review those presentations to, prepare for the next meeting. So now that brings us to the governor's budget proposal. So each year, the governor does the State of the State address, and then releases the budget proposal for the following year. It's called the executive budget proposal. And then, based on changes to formulas, or whatever, they calculate projected state aid under that proposal for every school district. And they're known as the state aid runs. This year, as you all know, we would be, under the governor's proposal, we would get a huge decrease in state aid. Now, the reason for that is a change to the foundation aid formula. The biggest piece of state aid is called foundation aid. There's a number of different aid categories that make up state aid. State aid is an umbrella term. There's transportation aid, there's building aid, there's excess cost aid, there's library materials aid, there's computer materials aid, textbook aid, and they all add up to what we just call state aid as a whole. The biggest single piece in there is foundation aid. Now, foundation aid, it's not like this time-tested formula that's like, makes all the sense in the world. Foundation aid was created in 2007 when they took, because state aid was turning into a big mess, and they took a bunch of aid categories that used to exist and said, well, you know what? We're going to simplify things. And you know how it works when governments try to simplify things, right? So they combined a bunch of aid categories and said, we're going to call that foundation aid. And everybody got what those categories had been, that all got condensed in there. It was operating aid and a couple of other things, all got condensed into foundation aid. And he said, here's what you're going to get. And then they backed into some crazy formula, right, that somebody made up. And some districts were getting more than the formula said they should get, and some districts were getting less, right? So now, since 2007, the last 17 years, it's just gone on that way. And everybody would get, well, here's what you got last year, and you'll get some percentage increase over that. It didn't matter really what the formula said, and it was a hold harmless. Otherwise, some people refer to it as a save harmless, meaning you wouldn't get less than you got last year. That's what they always did. This year, the government, let's go back 2 years. So the governor said, we need to fully fund foundation aid. And what that meant was, for the districts that were getting less than that formula said they should be getting, which just the way they wrote up the formula, tended to be the less wealthy school districts, not just on Long Island, throughout the state. They were getting less than the formula said, and the wealthier districts were getting more than the formula said. So 2 years ago, if you remember, if you were paying attention, there was record state aid increases because they started to actually, what they say, fully fund foundation aid. It was a couple of step process 2 years ago and then last year. And if you remember, some districts got enormous amounts of state aid increases last year. I mean, and nothing against them. This is not a knock on those districts, and they were probably underfunded for years. Brentwood last year, I think their foundation aid went up, I think it was $79 million, all in one shot like that. It's incredible money some districts are getting, and good for them. What we got, along with a lot of other districts, was, a minimum of 3% increase in foundation aid. That's what we got last year, because it was just, everybody would get at least a 3% increase, and that's what we got. This year, the governor is saying, forget the whole hold harmless thing. You get what the formula says you should get. You should get. But it's even worse than what it looks like in what was put out so far, because some districts, like ours, it would have been, instead of a $8 million deduction in our foundation aid, it really would have been about a $13 million reduction in foundation aid. But they put in what they call a transition adjustment. So we wouldn't get the full impact of that reduction all at once. It would be spread over 2 years. So that's why this, in the governor's budget proposal, our foundation aid would go down by $8 million next year. But if that continues, and it's part of the final state budget, and it continues next year, we'd see it go down another about $5 million more next year. So, and that's what we're fighting now. And there's a lot of, close to half of the districts in the state would actually see a reduction in aid. So there's a lot of political pressure on both sides to the governor from all over the state. It's not just a Long Island thing. It's all around the state. However, here's the bad side to it, and Kevin can talk about the politics a lot better than I can of it. New York City drives everything. They have the numbers in the Assembly and the Senate to drive the rest of the state. And, right, I mean, so do you want to talk about that a little bit?
So, New York City has what's called a supermajority. They have over 60% of the votes in the Assembly and the Senate. So whatever New York City wants, they can move ahead, no matter what happens. So regardless of how the rest of the state votes, New York City controls how the funding can go and all the other legislation that can occur in the state. It's just by way of the population is centered there. Remember, the Assembly, like the House of Representatives, is based upon population. The Senate is based upon the regions that are divided up into Senate districts. So to just take the next step, what Jeff had said, so the governor is required to do this proposal the second Tuesday in January. She has 30 days to amend that proposal. So right now, it's been 2 weeks today since that proposal went out. She has 16 more days to amend that. A lot of pressure is being put on her from both sides of the political aisle about this was a really bad idea, what was done. Part of that calculation that they're referring to that was in there was they considered the enrollment decrease that has occurred over a 10-year period. We went down by 23% over 10 years. So they said part of this formula now is that's part of the reduction in the aid, and our population went down. Not from this year to last year where we actually leveled off, or actually we're actually about 9 students more than last year. If it was just based on that, we probably would have gotten a slight increase. They're basing it on a 10-year period. So that was a heavy hit, to do it all at once. And again, as Jeff indicated, this is being used as a political chip. She's going in with this proposal, wanting to get something else from her colleagues on both sides of the aisle. It's a game. This game has been played before in the past. Before COVID hit, this was typical political process dating many, many years back. Even in the era before the tax cap era, it was done this type of way with things. So it's nothing new to the state. It's just that it's happening now. The only issue is, remember that 30 days she has. If by the 30 days she doesn't change anything, the Senate and the Assembly have a chance to propose their budgets. Now, they are usually due by March 1st. They could counteract her proposal and say, this is our proposal, fully fund, put the save harmless or hold harmless back into place, do a slight increase. Those are things that are being proposed right now. Many of the people that I've been speaking with, I know some of the presidents of the different units in the district have had conversations with their representatives and their constituencies, the advocacy groups that they have. We're all hearing the same thing, that this is not going to be the final budget. We appreciate that, but we're concerned because that time window is getting shorter and shorter. The state government, the governor, the Senate, and the Assembly are supposed to have a budget by April 1st. Ha ha ha. It has not happened in 20 some odd years, so don't hold your breath on that. The only trouble is with the way our budgets are set up. By about the 3rd week in April, we have to have our budget locked in for next year. So that's what goes out to the public. That's what gets voted on in May. It's every school district in the state of New York is on the same day in May, that Tuesday in May. That's it. No other vote on that. So if this doesn't get resolved before that April date, we have to plan as if this cut may be coming, regardless of whatever wrangling is still going on in the Senate's proposal and this, until we have a final number somewhere in there, or at least an inkling of a number in there. The board has to go by what is this cut, or lack thereof. So we hope that cooler heads will prevail in Albany, that they'll get together and come where either restore everything as we're hoping and with an increase of 3%. And just so you understand, a 3% increase last year was
A little under $900,000.
for us. So it wasn't as if we got a windfall of money here. Other districts, and I will back up what Jeff said, those other districts that got increases, massive increases in state aid, they also have been shortchanged even this process. They only got about 50% of what they were entitled to over the course of time. So they've been underfunded, and they're still underfunded in many regards. The total for the state, the total money that has been cut from the districts like ours, we're the highest on Long Island, not the highest percentage, but the highest on Long Island at 8.9 million, is $176 million. So that's the total cut for the state. If that was restored, just to give you a sense, as a school district, we are capped at a 4% in our reserves. That's the maximum we can have in our reserves. The state right now has 15% of their budget in reserves. So the state is carrying almost 4 times what we can carry as a school district in reserves. So that's something you should just be aware of. That there's a lot of money in Albany that's being held and could be used, if necessary, to fund this. But, as I said, it's a political game we're caught in. We're a pawn in that process in many ways. We were not the highest percentage cut. If you look at the numbers, Port Jeff actually got a much larger percent cut than we did. They got cut 28%. So Port Jeff's cut, the number is much smaller than ours. It's about an eighth of what we were cut. Is still devastating to them. So it's a much smaller district. They have one grade level that has 50 students in it, another with 95 in it. So it's a very small school district. So, and there's other things going on there as well with the plant and everything there. So there's a lot of factors in this. So that's the window we are under right now as we are looking at this. So what we said to the board last week about what that could look like here, what the potential impact of that would be, is that we would have to consider closing the school. Even though our proposal with the strategic plan a few weeks ago was do not close the school, primarily for the reason of if we move the 6th grade, we need the schools to be open so that we can plan for the pre-K that's going to be required by 2030. Our current program would fulfill that, but the number could go up to the 18 sections we have right now in kindergarten, potentially. And if people were given the choice of free pre-K in their public school or paying for it with the 29 different programs that are in the region here, they're probably going to go with the free public school pre-K. We would probably have to look at closing also the 3 Village Academy. Now, that seems very detrimental to us because the academy costs us about $1.3 million, but we bring 10 students from out of district that pay $93,000 per student at the current non-resident tuition special education rate. So it's about a $400,000 cost difference there. However, when we created that program, one of the things we did was we pulled back students that were in BOCES programs that was running us almost $2 million a year to send them to. So we would then have on the other end, by eliminating that, incur that cost again because some of those students may go back to some of those programs. They could return to Ward Melville or the 2 junior high schools because we do have 9th graders at the academy, but we would have no way of knowing. The cost for sending them to BOCES would be an exponential increase. So something to just throw out there. Looked at closing our pre-K program as it is now, which is basically kicking a can down the road. If we close it now, we're going to have to reopen it in potentially 5 more years at a much higher cost. We have 5 teachers in the program and 5 aides. If we needed 18, obviously we need 13 more teachers and 13 more aides. What would be logical is if we every year increase the number of sections of pre-K we offered, so when 2030 hits, it's not a $1.3 million in staffing increase and just the teaching end alone. We would also probably eliminate the pre-K enrichment program. Now the pre-K enrichment program people pay tuition for, so that would also be a revenue loss for us. Eliminate the IG program. Although it serves a very small component of the population, it's very popular. It's we're one of the few districts with a self-contained IG program. Look at eliminating administrative positions, teaching positions, SEAs, monitors, security, programs and services. Just stop for security for a second. So about 12 years ago, we were spending about $500,000 in security. We had Sandy Hook happen, Uvalde, Texas happened. And Parkland happened. So our budget now is around 3.1 million. But that incurs everything, all of the expenses of the cameras that we have, the security that we provide. It makes our building safe. Are we going to compromise safety for this factor? Programs.
And I'm sorry, before Sandy Hook, we had no security in our elementary schools.
Right. Well, I could go back even further through the teachers who are here with me. Before Columbine hit, the only building in the district that had security was Ward Melville, and we're talking maybe about 3 or 4 guards up there. It wasn't until after Columbine that we got 1 security guard in each of the junior high schools, and that was it. And we didn't have anybody before that, and none of the elementary schools had security up until when Sandy Hook happened. So that's what we've put into place, the procedures we put into place, which, by the way, the county and town and the area uses us as the epitome of what we should be doing with security, having the security that we have in our schools in place. We'd have to cut programs and services. We'd have to cut clubs, activities, athletics, equipment. We certainly do need some new positions. As we indicated before, E&L population is expanding here. We were considering prior to this cut increasing by another E&L teacher this year. We put one in place for this year, and we put a social worker in place this year. We needed probably another E&L teacher, considering what our numbers have come in as so far this year. We need that. Part of that's a compliance issue as well. One of the things we're looking at for next year is increasing another psychologist. We are maxed out. Our social workers and psychologists, between the students on IEPs and 504s, they're to the complete max, to the point where they're not even able to complete the Medicaid forms to get the refunding back for the number of kids they're seeing. And that's just with the students that are on their IEPs and 504s, not including the students that come along that have issues on a daily basis. And sadly, we are not over all the stuff from COVID yet. And you can even forget about using COVID. We have students with a lot more issues these days. Our guidance counselors are to the max. We were looking at reducing guidance counselor loads as well in some of our schools. We're not going to be able to do that. So unfortunately, if we don't get that money, it's not going to happen. And any new programs we're looking at putting in place. And we have a number of different things we were looking at putting in place for a variety of different reasons, for things that just to keep us on the threshold of where we are as a thriving district. One comment that was made to me when we were talking about some of these things, one parent said, well, those things are not requirements. Well, if we want to go down the list of not requirements, AP is not required, honors is not required, pre-K is not required, kindergarten is not required, full-day kindergarten is certainly not required either. Kindergarten is not a mandatory grade level and for the rest of the state. It is in New York City, but not out here. So, not in the rest of the state. So, those are things that are not required. We're not required to do clubs. So there's a lot of things that when we say we're not required, library's not required. We're not required to do the music programs that we have. We're not required to do the art programs that we have. But those are all things, all those services, all those organizations. We have 63 clubs at the high school, servicing 1,415 students. You practically could go there and see anything that you would want to see as far as an opportunity to join something. That's what all these things which make Three Village unique. We are the #1 school district in this area of Suffolk County with the number of AP exams we have. We have Regeneron scholars. All these things contribute to our reputation. Eliminating this is going to be extremely detrimental. Now, there's a few ways the board could go. They could look at, as we said before, increasing the tax cap. That has been disastrous for us in the past. So that would, we were probably looking at a tax cap somewhere in the
I mean, to make up all of that, 7-8%, something like that.
In that range, yeah. We haven't seen anything like that since the late 90s, when we had 10% or more in tax increases. Highly doubt that would fly in the face of anything. And even if we tried to do that, the community would want to see some probably cuts made in some areas of some. It is. It is. We're being used.
The bright side, if there is one, is just that, though. It is such a ridiculous amount, and for almost half of the districts in the state to be getting cut, that's why it gives us hope. If it was $1 million reduction, it'd be like, uh-oh. Yeah, that's a problem, because there wouldn't be crazy outcry around the state for a modest reduction.
Right. So the governor, 2 days, which was very brave, she was 2 days after, after this happened, she came down to Kings Park School District. I thought she was checking herself into the psych center because of what she put up as a proposal. I didn't want to tell her that it closed several years ago. She went to Kings Park School District, and she did mention to my friend there, Tim Egan, who's the superintendent there, that this is the first blush at her budget. It's a very bad blush at the budget from our perspective, but it's a blush, you know. And again, it's a political tool. We're being used in that process. It's sad that students are included in that process. It's, you know, this is one of her first gloss about giving something, and hopefully she's going to get something she wants type of thing. It's this give, forget. Again, my concern, we were contacted by our local representatives. They're going to try to do their best to represent us. They held a press conference here last week. We had the House of Representatives all the way through assemblymen, state senators all came here to talk, voice their opinions. We put out the notification to the parents and the community to let them know this is what's going on. We've provided opportunities for advocacy letters. We gave a template. You can certainly write your own letters, but there's information, general information about what we're advocating for this district. I know several hundreds of parents and residents that are advocating for us. I even got contacted by people that are living at Jefferson Ferry, who are, many of whom are retired teachers that are living there, are writing letters on our behalf. They are members of our community and they're supporting us. They vote for our budget quite often. I'm hoping Mrs. Pollock will vote for our budget if we give her the 100% next time. So, you know, we're doing everything on our end to do that type of stuff. So that level of advocacy is there. Senator Palumbo and Assemblyman Flood are going to hold a rally on Thursday afternoon using the sidewalk in front of Ward Melville High School. Ward Melville as the backdrop to do an education rally about this as well. I think the more voices we have out there to try to hear things, we are trying not to get, as a school district, we are not getting involved in the political, you know, back and forth about where other monies have gone. That's not our purview. That's not what we're about. Whatever the governor's budget or whatever they decided to spend it on in any other areas is fine. Overall, the budget for education in the state of New York increased. That is correct. The SUNY system and the CUNY system got a lot more money. By the way, King is back as, he's chancellor of the SUNY system now. He was the education chancellor, now he's back as the SUNY chancellor. So he's there, they've gotten a pot of money, but overall it's, school districts have gotten some. 34 school districts in Suffolk County got cut. 44 on Long Island in total. So, and it's districts like us that are considered in high wealth areas. The interesting factor to that, as we just mentioned, is if you took a segment of our population which has a large chunk of that wealth and pulled them out, we'd be about Midland. We'd be about equivalent to Sachem and Cumswog and some of the funding in some of our areas in this community. But we have pockets of very high wealth that contribute to raising that. We have one individual who pays $750,000 a year in property taxes. So that's just the property tax bill. So they write one check to the town and it's done.
He does not get one of the exemptions.
He's not part of the 204 or any other.
He makes a little more than that 29,000.
Yes. So that's our current stance of what our situation is right now. Now, for some people, what we're putting out there, I got an anonymous letter that said, I'm fear-mongering the district. No, we're not trying to fear-monger. We're just giving you the information, and you as an educated resident, taxpayer in this community, employee, whatever you might be in your role, now you make the decision about what you want to advocate for. So that's where we are at the present time. So we're all sort of in a limbo waiting game. There's a hope that maybe the governor might pull back her proposal and do something else, but she's not going to do that without getting something, I assume, from somebody else.
I just want to mention one thing about the 4%, just in case there are some business officials such as Carol's son watching from home. The 4% limit is on our unreserved fund balance. Right. The reserves, which are have to be designated for a specific purpose, are regulated by, we need to justify how much is in there. So the 4% is on the fund balance piece. So, does anybody have questions or comments about the state aid governor's budget proposal piece?
Jeff, I just have one question. I apologize because most of my experience has been from the corporate side or the private sector side. I know on the private sector side, usually once you eliminate a position, it's very hard to gain that position back. Is that very similar on the public
Yes.
sector side?
Yes.
So if we start to cut that way through making eliminations to teachers, to sack employees, those kind of things, to gain those employees back,
Would be difficult.
it would be difficult.
It's difficult, especially with the tax cap.
So to give an example is, prior to COVID, we had a STEM program here, one STEM teacher in every building, that there's pullouts with every grade level on a rotational basis. When COVID hit, that staff was absorbed into the COVID staffing numbers. And remember, this district during COVID, we kept every student in school, and we fully ran an entire elementary remote school. It was going, if you didn't want to bring your child in, you want to be in a remote setting, complete remote setting, you had that option. At the secondary level, students could remote into any class on any day. It pushed our technology department to the utter limits of what was able to be done. Teachers here were going through trainings every single day. And you know, veteran teachers that were like me that came on board when computers were just starting out, there was no internet yet, there was none of that fun stuff. We're learning new skills and trying to do new things. We really went to the nth degree. But that's also the year the budget went down.
Okay.
So,
I really hate to speak about this, but I lived through this when working for a school district in the late 90s. We got a mid-year notice that the aid was being cut. We were hopeful it would change, and it did not. And we wound up accessing 110 teachers. By the way, secondary librarians are mandated.
they are, yes.
Okay.
Elementary not.
But to your point, I mean, even though the teachers have right of recall, you're not getting, in many cases, you're not getting the same person back that you let go. And rightly so. They were bitter. Our assistant superintendent spent hours on the phone trying to negotiate with other districts to find positions for these people. So I would just say, as the planning goes by, if there are, just explore every option before we get to that
So
option.
historically too, the gap elimination, was.
Cap elimination adjustment.
Was $6 million back then. And that was when I was just starting back here in 2000. We lost 150 staff members district-wide, teachers, administrators, all different positions. So that was just $6 million. So we have to remember, we have contractual obligations with class sizes that we have to keep, and then there's just logic that kicks in. Like, we've done a good job of trying to keep class sizes on the fairly smaller side for a long time here, and many people would argue maybe too small, and some people would argue not small enough. So it depends on what you feel where you are at that circumstance. If anything gets above 27, my phone rings off the hook. So so we have to keep that in mind as we move forward. In this day and age, having some classes, especially with the number of students, we have to be careful with ratios. It's supposed to be 1/3 to 2/3 ratios, the students with special needs with general education students. Those ratios are probably going to go out of whack. Same thing is with the ENL population, the 504 population. So it's going to have a tremendous impact for us. It would be virtually, just so we are clear, and I know there are people probably watching and saying, yes, he said close the school. It would be virtually impossible to close the school between now and September. It is virtually impossible to do that. So that alone would save about $1.4 million. It's not going to be enough. That's not even an eighth of where we are, what we need to cut. So if they want to look at closing a school and repurposing and renting it, well, let me know who wants to rent it, because there's not a lot of renters out there for some of the schools. We're not the only district being impacted by this. BOCES has expressed interest in renting a building from us, but BOCES isn't going to pay us $1 million a month for a school. It's probably going to be in the 250 to 300 range at best, depending on how big of space they take over. So it's not going to be, we're going to make a windfall of money. I've actually been approached by real estate agents, not Michael, who told me, sell the land, sell the school. I'm like, well, we have to remember, we also have covenants on our properties. We cannot just sell them off. Yes,
Right.
yes. So I'm going to give you the numbers. You can call them and tell them that. We have a piece of property off of Hawkins Road. It's 18 acres. We cannot sell that property if we go to sell it unless it's for an educational purpose, use it for an educational purpose, otherwise it reverts to the town. So, well, it was meant to be another elementary school. Back in 1966, they just simply ran out of money to build another elementary school. There was supposed to be 2 high schools in this district. They ran out of money. They couldn't build it. By Mount, there's a 40-some-odd acre preserve over there. Yes, that was supposed to be the 3rd junior high school. Was supposed to. It's a nice area. Needs some work on it. We're working with the county and the state on getting some stuff done in there. But we just can't sell the property and get the money, and then a real estate agent will probably want to go in and sell it and make either more likely houses, or, you know, we don't have a large corporate infrastructure here either, so probably not going to be building factories in Thrill Village. And yes, yeah.
You wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And coming from the facility side, even if we did rent a facility, we would still have to maintain it. So we would
Correct.
still incur the cost of.
Right, and even
maintaining
if we
the grounds.
mothballed it completely, we didn't rent it, we still have to produce heat. This is sort of the thing about February break that people get tied up on, like, oh, you know, we need to have February break. February break came along with the Carter administration. It was designed to save fuel oil, but what they forgot was the Northeast has this little thing called temperature changes that happen in winter. So we still have to run heat in the building, otherwise if you did it in your house and it dropped to 20 degrees, we're gonna burst pipes all over the place. So we still have to maintain it, so no matter what would happen. And over the course of time, the building you're sitting in right now was a school. We did close it at one point. Christian Avenue was a school. Sadly, it burned down, and then we sold it and developed it into a neighborhood, but we've had to do that in the past. The difference is, though, as we've been saying, while the population has been declining, we're starting to level off now. So before we start saying, as your point before, how many more people are moving into the community? How many more households? Are these young families coming in? Are they going to bring more kids? What's going to happen? Is it going to swing the other way?
That's exactly right, which is where we started this whole conversation and what you've said.
Right.
Because it does come back.
And if you look at that chart behind you, I hope that, I can't see that far over there. You can see where we are and where we've gone. It goes up and down a little bit over the course of years. So we got to be very careful with that. You can't base it upon going to the hospitals and getting birth rates, because, you know, they don't just service just Three Village. They service the whole community. But, you know, it is not the same school district that people that went here 25, 30 years ago went to, or started here 25, 30 years ago. We've certainly changed dynamically. I certainly believe, and I think many of my colleagues would concur, we provide a lot more services than even we provided back then. We still have a wonderful reputation out there. I was a college admissions counselor. I recruited from Ward Melville High School. I can tell you a B at Ward Melville was the equivalent of A in most of the school districts in the country, let alone in the state. So the rigor of the work that our students complete, the opportunities they have, those clubs, those athletics, all those things are what makes us special. And the people make us special. I keep emphasizing that. It's all of us in this community that make us special. And even the changing dynamic of this community is going to make us special. Our poverty rate's gone from 4% to 14%. E&L's gone up by 50%. Asian population's gone from 9% to 13%. The Hispanic population's gone from 4% to 9%. Multiracial's gone from less than 1% to 3%. Black population's gone from 1% to 2%. So the district is changing.
And you know what's good about that? I don't mean to interrupt you. The fact that we are becoming more and more diverse is going to make this community stronger.
I
And
concur.
I mean that not only for the North Shore, for the South Shore.
Mhm.
It really is making a good difference.
And that's-
You can get through any kind of situation.
Yeah.
Because as areas get more diverse, like you said, they're not leaving, they're learning, and
Mhm.
we're learning from them.
That's right.
I can say that about an office I have in Patchogue. Good for them they got that much money.
I agree.
But at the end of the day, they're doing something.
Right. The saddest piece, though, for some of those districts, even with getting that windfall of money as we would perceive it, they're optimistically cautious about what they put in place, because the rug can be pulled out with that aid at any point in time by some political maneuvering. So what those districts are attempting to do, they're going baby steps, because they've been burned so many times before. I've worked in some of those districts. I can tell you, when we used to call it austerity, it wasn't contingency years ago. I'd have to crawl out on the roof to get pencils for the kids to be able to fill out the forms that we were required to do. I would bring in my own paper and stuff from my own home to just give kids things to write with and stuff. They've been underserved for a long, long time. There was no equity there. in that regard, so.
I'm glad to hear doesn't mean population drop and everything is less, because you hit on a lot of points, about how enrollment is just a number, but the need has grown, the EL population has grown, this suicidal ideation with students have grown, and that's a point that we need to still hammer home, because total number does not mean the same it was when services weren't what they are now and the population is different. It's a big deal. But I just want to ask you this. I just had two questions. When you talked about the academy possibly closing, but it's self-funding with the BOCES and the outside, how does that not stay if this happens?
We had to just show that these are things that could be cut. So
Okay,
it's not-
but for me, like, something in my head, when it was created, right? Great concept. It's self-funding, it's making money.
No, it doesn't make money.
And it's not quite self-funded.
No, it costs about $1.4 million to staff the academy right now. We bring in about $930,000 in revenue, so it's not a completely self-funded program.
Right, but we would,
Yes, and that's what we had to do when we, yes, it's dependent upon whether or not those students do go back there or not. Every individual year, it could be 10 students, it could be 20 students, but that would incur a cost to us, yes. 9 through 12.
Do you have kids in elementary that are in need of services that they're supposed to be promoted into the academy?
Well, the academy serves 4 grade levels. It doesn't serve an elementary level or a junior high school level yet. So we have. Yes. Well, we have had families who have attended the academy here who've decided, you know what, it's such a great district. I'm selling my house where I live and I want to move into the district just to have my child go there and save their home district the money, or not have their child commuting from another school district. But we have a waiting list of about 16 deep. We could take 16 more students tomorrow, but we're trying to keep we didn't build the program for someone else. We built it for our students who were struggling here. The first class of students that went through the academy here, most of those students were school phobic. They hadn't stepped foot in any one of our schools during the entire time they had been in our educational system. We had one child who was a selective mute when she came here. She gave the graduation speech 3 years later. So that's success. And what we don't see, as Anthony's pointing out, our graduation rate, we pride ourselves on what our rate is. We're very high. We're in the high 90% graduation, 97, 98, and we're fluctuating in those ranges. Those students, if they didn't have this opportunity, most likely would be non-grads. Now, we'd probably lower our graduation rate by 2% every year going forward. So there's a benefit to all of that as well. So, and it's not the alternative school that people think of. Like years ago, there was a stigma attached to BOCES. BOCES is not that way whatsoever. In fact, this year alone, from last year to this year, we had 30 students in BOCES. We have 77 today. And I'm proud of that fact, because there are career paths for kids beyond just going to college. There's plenty of opportunities out there. We have a student that graduated a few years ago that became a welder. A certified welder on Long Island starts at $150,000, folks. So while all of his friends are going off spending money, and sometimes up to $80,000 a year for college, and coming out with all that debt, he made $600,000 in 4 years. So, and he's taking underwater welding classes now to be an underwater welder, scuba diving classes. Those salaries start at the 7-digit range and higher. So there are these opportunities. Just call a plumber, electrician, or a carpenter tonight and see how much they're going to charge you just walking in the door and looking at whatever you got going on. It's probably off the charts. So those are career paths. And we started putting into place some programs several years ago now, the CTE program, Career and Technical Education program. We have a marketing class that students get CTE credit for. We have the early childhood education program that students get the CTE credit for. So we're looking to keep expanding that. We had every junior high school student, what grade level did we do CDOS, Anthony? 7th grade. Yep. Every student took the test to start to prepare themselves for the CDOS. So that's the success stories. So I can't tell you what I said when the governor's budget came out, because I had to go to confession after that. But it was just ridiculous, as Jeff said. It's just an absurd number. Like, how much are you going to cost? A gazillion. That's really what it came down to with us. And it's a political ploy. We're hopeful that our advocacy, and if you haven't written a letter to the governor or to the local elected officials, please do that. Whatever viewpoint you want to give them about this. You could use our templates that we have on the district website, or you can use your own letter, but we all need to advocate for something.
Oh, just, I mean, in what was originally planned for starting budget discussions with the group. Now, the state aid proposal kind of took the headlines away, but I wanted to at least get started on talking about some budget stuff. That's why I mentioned, and I sent before last meeting, everyone should have this. This was emailed to everybody. It's some information about employee benefits, including the retirement system, our debt service, some transportation information. So, I mean, it's getting close to 9 o'clock tonight, so we won't have, so I just wanted to briefly mention this. If you look at this stuff, I also sent to everybody, you should have in your email. This is from last year. There's a two-parter. It's where we broke down the dollars in the budget by various categories. If that helps you to, you got at our first meeting, you got the line item budget. This kind of breaks, this is last year what we covered, breaks down the budget into categories, so you can look at that. If you have questions, and if you can email questions, you don't have to wait till the next meeting. And, we want to get as all your questions answered, whatever you may come up with.
Just so everyone is aware, when, probably many of you know this, especially the people that are in business, when you let go an employee from a school district, just like you let go a business, you got to pay them unemployment insurance. So we got to pay them unemployment as well. So they're not gone yet. We still have to pay for that. So however many that 150 staff members we let go 12 years ago, we had to pay unemployment for all of them. So so while you save on one end, you still have an expense on another.
And then your unemployment insurance goes up.
Yes.
Well, we're self-insured for unemployment insurance, so, yeah, but yes.
But when they find a job, then you don't need to pay for it.
Correct.
I have two more questions, one for Michael. Are you aware of any new development in our area? And this one goes to the excess land that we have that's not being put into use. Can we can concede it to the town and have them build more residential? Can we?
Where, are you aware of any new residential?
Some of the things developers that we're hearing about, developing should be specifically in this area or north of 347, south of 347, I have all this going on the island that we live in. To answer your question about this area, the first thing they're looking at, to try to do, is the people 55 and over, but not a lot, enough for that. And no age limit. So they can be condos, they can be small houses. They're gonna allow a little more, what you remember to be little downtown. This area is downtown, little town, but people live up there. They're gonna go back to that, and they're looking at that right now, all over that.
Like a patch
And
on?
particularly in Green Village, there's not a lot of land. There's not a lot to speak of. You're not gonna get that. I remember when the things he's talking about, no disrespect, but Mount School was gonna have a high school, and that was stopped, because the community did not want it. And so it happened.
It was also gonna cost us $220 million. It was also gonna cost us $220 million to build it at that time, too.
Exactly. We didn't have the money to do it, the market was horrible. It was in times where they were saying, let's build another high school. They were like, okay, where's the money come to build a high school? Oh, so let's sell the land. You can't just sell the land, because you're not allowed to just sell the land. And just back then, talk about the places where there's certain things that the town of Brookhaven owns. They're opening their eyes up to, maybe we should let some more building take place a little further east and on the North Shore and on the South Shore. But right here, very difficult. And there are people that are trying to find ways to do that. So if you know anyone that's trying to do it, let us know. I'm not looking to take their business. I'm looking to try to make the change that's gonna make this area better. Because there's lots of things they wanna do on 25A. Maybe this time, everyone's gonna do it, because it would allow mixed use. And we'd have more people that would come back, that don't come back, because there's nowhere to live. And which is in the works, it's gonna take about another 8 years, and it looks like we're gonna finally get it. But that's more conversation. What you just said is very true, because it's gonna happen, it's gonna go all the way into the village, it's gonna go all the way down 25 Avenue. And that's been being worked on for over 20-something years, and it's gonna happen, to your point. Where that building's gonna go around it, it's around those parts of town. And that's exactly what's gonna happen. So it is gonna happen, but the sewers have to come in. And now we're finally gonna get sewers. They're gonna finally shut down Lawrence Aviation. That's about to be paid and taken care of. That's gonna change where the train's gonna turn around, so that it's not so difficult to go over one twelve. And they'll be allowed to do more building for people that go to Stony Brook. It's one stop. It's all in the mix. Let's keep talking about it, because it's there. And I'm not saying it to do business. I'm saying it because I get involved in this stuff on purpose, because you gotta make a difference. My children all came back. They live in Mount Sinai, and they live in Port Jefferson. Well, where am I going? I don't need the house I have in Setauket, but when I sell it, I'm not leaving. I mean, escape from Naples as much as I want, but I still come back, because my children like living here.
So an organization.
I like you're giving me a good question. It's a very good question, and if the right people get together, we can build stuff.
An organization that's out there that's cited our area for further development is Erase Racism. They have put out a chart. If you want to look at their website, they've done a study about available land that more housing could be built on.
Correct.
So I was interviewed by Newsday TV to talk about what that meant. And one of the things I just cautioned was this, you have to be careful though with some of the zoning requirements. So in parts of Oldfield and Polkwat, you cannot build, multiple family dwellings in certain locations.
Things will change on that.
Yeah, so,
Things will change on that, because it's starting to.
Correct.
Not to stop you from your
No,
interview, but what you're talking about, but this isn't the same Oldfield anymore. The people that are running Oldfield are younger, they listen, they say, no, we're gonna allow you to do that. Yes, you can go ahead, you're still on your 3 acres. Yes, you can put a cottage on the back, and yes, you can rent a cottage. You couldn't say those things. You said that, they wanted to kill you. That's gone. It's gone in Polkwat. It's finally getting changed, not too much in Belterre, because they made that a very special area. They said everything is, anything you buy in Belterre, you're buying in preserve.
well, some of our E&L population is not coming from parts of the community where people would assume. It's coming from some of the wealthy areas where it's the people that work on the properties that are sending their children here, and not the people that own the properties. So.
I gave you a broad answer, but it's happening. It's just, you gotta
Just
talk
gonna take
about,
time.
we gotta talk
Yeah.
about it some more.
I thank
All right.
everyone for tonight.
So, any questions or requests for information, please send me an email, and we'll get you the answers. Okay? Good
Thank
night,
you very much,
everyone.
everyone.